Joining me on the panel is Naveeth, Bashir. Naveeth is the founder and executive director of an organization called AWASH, which is in full Aquatic Welfare for African Sustainability and Health. It is an organization working to improve the welfare of farmed fish in Ghana through practical, cost-effective, and evidence-based interventions. AWASH partners directly with tilapia farmers and local institutions to reduce disease and unexpected mortality. Through close collaboration with Ghanaian aquaculture experts, veterinarians, and farmers, Naveeth identifies the significant opportunity to embed fish welfare into Ghana's rapidly growing aquaculture sector. And AWASH focuses on simple and high impact practices while building trust and shared ownership with farmers. Naveeth holds a master's degree in civil engineering from the Imperial College, London. And before founding AWASH, he spent nearly a decade working in fast-paced technology startups where he developed strong skills in strategy, relationship building, and effective implementation. So this background shapes AWASH's pragmatic approach, testing interventions in real farm conditions, prioritizing practical and scalable solutions, and linking welfare improvements to tangible outcomes, such as survival rates, feed efficiency, and production costs to increase farmer adoption. You're welcome, Naveeth, on the panel. Also joining us on the panel is Farhan Akorede, who is a Nigerian veterinary surgeon, research scientist, and analyst with expertise in animal welfare, One Health, antimicrobial resistance, and food and livestock systems. He has led and contributed to several grant-funded multi-regional research projects across Nigeria, focused on improving animal welfare practices, farmer behavior, and public health outcomes, supported by organizations like WTS and the Humane Slaughter Association. So Farhan's work applies behavior models as well as quantitative and qualitative research methods to inform policy-relevant solutions in low and middle-income country contexts. He has conducted extensive field research on animal welfare during transport, in livestock markets, within various production systems, and regularly engages stakeholders through surveys, interviews, workshops, and advocacy. He holds a Doctor of Veterinary Medicine degree and is currently pursuing a Master's in Veterinary Neuropharmacology. You're welcome, Farhan. And also our presenter for today, Wasseem, you are also joining us on the panel. I've already introduced you. To start off this panel discussion, I have just a follow-up question to Wasseem. Just to summarize from your presentation, what would you say were the key knowledge gaps among fish farmers that project managers or donors need to be aware of that can potentially undermine the success of their fish-related projects? And also, you can tell us a bit on how this can be addressed.
Sure. Thank you very much for the question, Dr. Paul. So, as I think I just mentioned, the main gap that we see is that the concept of animal welfare is not really recognized in itself. Actually, I didn't say this at all, but in Arabic, we don't even have a word for animal welfare that translates well. It can actually sometimes seen as a luxury or like an additional thing. So we have to use another way to relay that. So I think on my second and third slides, I try to frame the decisions around things more like survival, growth, disease. These are concepts that are much more familiar, and they're all obviously elements. If we use of 5 domains or the 3 circles, health, behavior. These are all part of those frameworks. So it's not separate. That's what we have to really emphasize. And welfare problems sometimes can seem as unavoidable or normalized, and we try to emphasize how small decisions and changes in practices can avoid that issue. And the second gap that we see is so I think I touched upon this briefly, is the idea of feedback and not getting clear signals. So farmers, we work with them on changing things like handling practices, feeding practices, or even management approaches, and it takes some time to see that lead to a different outcome. So if assessment doesn't translate into a visible benefit, we find that good practice tends to be abandoned quite quickly, and that can obviously undermine the success of a project that otherwise was quite well designed, but that behavior change component is the missing gap to answer your question. Yeah, and but the nice thing really is that these gaps can be addressed fairly easily. So if we link welfare to the things that farmers care already observe and they care about, using simple indicators, embedding assessment into daily routines, these are the things that can help the signals that are relevant to welfare, make them visible to farmers in terms of productivity and management. So that's how we ensure that uptake and consistency can improve. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Wasseem, for that. And following up from that, Naveeth, and also based on your experiences, Naveeth, what are some of the strategies that seem to work and project managers or donors can consider them in projects aimed at transforming fish welfare and productivity in Africa?
Thank you so much. I would say one of the first things to think about is the fact that Africa really isn't homogenous. There's definitely lessons you can learn. I've definitely learned a lot from successful organizations like ESR, but also there'll be country-specific dynamics that you really need to do your research and understand what they are. So for example, a lot of countries, fish farming is dominated by smaller scale pond farms, whereas in Ghana, if you look at production number, it's main production comes from larger scale cage farms. So your strategies for improving welfare for those will be completely different. So you need to understand the local dynamics and the stakeholder engagements and things like that. The other thing that's been really successful for us is we hired a local aquaculture expert who works at the Fisheries Commission. His main role is to support farmers, provide support and advice to them. He already has incredible existing relationships with very key stakeholders. And so firstly, that already brings you in with an element of trust. So when you're approaching these farmers, you're not approaching it as someone from the outside, you're approaching it almost as someone from the inside. And so they're more willing to work with you. But also he has extensive knowledge of what has and hasn't worked in the past. And so then you can kind of learn from what's happening before rather than trying to repeat the same kind of mistakes over again. So that's been really successful.
Yeah, quite well. Thank you, Naveeth, for that submission. And Farhan, similar to Naveeth, the question that Naveeth was responding to, if you look at existing political, the institutional capacities and challenges in African countries, what would you say are the opportunities and challenges that prevail that project managers of fish welfare projects should be aware of, and how can they utilize and mitigate them?
All right. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the question. And you see, in Africa, fish welfare is generally farm animal welfare is interconnected with productivity. If farmers are not going into farmers don't like to adopt that would not increase yield for them. So whenever any welfare intervention is being given to them, they have to see an end goal that increases productivity for them, right? So project managers and fish welfare advocates the discussion has to be centered and aligned with existing practices, and regulations rather than just total replacement or sudden replacement. So it has to be connected with what they know. And, in Africa, we are very cultural and traditional. So if it is too strange, they will not adopt. If it is too alien to them, they will not adopt. If it is not linked to productivity, they would find it difficult to adopt. So key opportunities that exist right now is that fish welfare is gaining a lot of attention. So now is the time for project managers in Africa to stand up and think. They have to think and outside the box and design things that would align with the farmers, right? And yes, fish welfare is so much into food security and food safety and public health. There's no how you talk about fish welfare and you won't mention this too, both food security and food safety. And as a project manager, that itself is an opportunity. The moment you try to tackle fish welfare, you are entering into food security and food safety. And the world right now is, tending towards that. So to mention but few, there are a lot of challenges. There are a lot of challenges in Africa concerning fish welfare. I'll mention few of them, which is regulation. There are laws, there are existing regulations, there are existing rules, but we in Africa, there is usually a problem of enforcement. You will find out that there are a lot of laws, punitive or not, but they are not being enforced. They are not being enforced. In some instances, you can see a fine attached to a violation of a regulation to be not up to $10. And this is a big a violation. And when farmers see these or people know about it, they'll be like, oh, I can just pay it and do whatever I like. So these are some of the challenges PM are going to face: enforcement, specific policies for fish welfare. And like Wasseem mentioned in his presentation, you have to design locally. Don't bring foreign intervention and try to adapt it here. It's most times will not work. So PMs, the basic mitigation strategy for them is design locally. That's one. Two, research. You cannot do without research. So you have to research, you have to know these people, know what the specific problems are, then you design towards each and everything you found out. Not just, okay, this works here. Even in Ghana, you cannot bring what works in Ghana into Nigeria. You have to research what is specific to Nigeria and design towards it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Farhan, for that submission. I want to go to Naveeth once again. Considering that the farmers have a tendency to be derailed from good practice, based on your experience, how can we best sustain the changes in fish welfare and production that have been cultivated through projects?
Thank you. Yeah. And I think some things have sort of been mentioned before, but I guess really just thinking about what do the farmers care about and what are their incentive structures. So obviously, they care about production, they care about their income, but also what influences those incentive structures. So, for example, one of the things that sometimes gets said for improving welfare is improving welfare improves the quality of the fish, and so then you'll get more revenue. And that's true in some places, but actually in other places that's not necessarily the case. And so it's not, you can't always make that argument. So that comes back to like the localization piece as well. It's like, what do the local dynamics of the business structures and stuff work out? Also just really bringing them along in the process. So really listening to what their concerns are, what are their issues. Okay, there might be other, maybe what you think are more pressing issues externally, but if the farmers don't think they're the most pressing issues, they're not necessarily going to apply it. And so really bring them along in the process. What are their existing practices, and see how you can integrate some of your solutions into their existing practices rather than making them completely flip the table and do everything from fresh. And as been mentioned before, really trying to keep it as simple as possible, particularly because fish welfare is quite novel in a lot of African countries. So there is low-hanging fruit out there. So at this stage, we can really try to find some of those simple solutions that can have really big impact. And then later down the line, as you've already built that trust with the local farmers, then you can start to try to introduce more complicated processes.
Yeah, thank you, Naveeth. Wasseem, there is a question in the chat from Joe that I would like you to look at, that you will respond to after this other question I have for Farhan. Farhan, you are coming from a research background. Could you tell us some of the research gaps that still exist as far as fish welfare and production is concerned in Nigeria and perhaps in Africa? And also, if you can tell us if there are some opportunities for funding or for collaboration in that space.
Right. Oh, thank you for that. Oh, right. Yes. Coming from a research perspective, concerning fish welfare in Africa. You see, like I've mentioned, like it has been mentioned in this webinar, everything is kind of connected together. So when PMs or a researcher want to design, want to make a research design, your research questions has to be questions that will answer problems specific to your region. You don't design, you don't use protocols that are foreign or that will not, that the answers will not be effective. It might be a good research questions, but it is not effective to your region. And at this point in Africa, we have a lot of research gaps. We have a lot of data gaps. We have lots of research questions that are specific to regions. And by the time we start taking each and every one of this, you have a lot of study to carry out. You have a lot of research to carry out. So researchers or advocates need to design context-specific, welfare indicators. You have to make it specific to your region before you even scale. And like it was mentioned that sometimes translating, for example, welfare to some languages might be difficult. I think Wasseem mentioned that it is even difficult to translate that in Arabic. Yes, in local context, in some local languages, take for example in Nigeria where we have over 100 languages. Some of the languages do not have welfare. But what you can do as a researcher is break it down. For example, there's the 5 freedoms of animal welfare. By the time you put that into context, you break it down into these 5 freedoms and 5 domains. Each of this would align with what welfare is, and farmers, your local farmers, your local stakeholders will be able to relate. They will relate perfectly to what you're trying to tell them, even if welfare itself cannot be directly translated. So another thing is we need to think collaboratively. There is a need to harmonize every effort. There are a lot of individual, solutions that are Afrocentric, but then there is a need for us to have some sort of connection, a connectedness within each and every individual, each and every research institute, each and every advocate need to have some sort of connection whereby, okay, we can measure our progress. What have we done? Okay, what did you do there that works in Ghana? Can I replicate it in Kenya? Okay, can I test this in Kenya? What were your challenges in Ghana? Is it similar to what we have in Uganda? Okay, how did you tackle this in Uganda? Maybe we can implement this in Ethiopia, like that. So as a researcher, you have to think broad, design locally, but think broad. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Farhan. I think if anyone has been following animal welfare discussions lately, the issue of collaborating, cooperating, working together, because some of the problems in one part are similar to what is happening elsewhere. So you don't have to reinvent everything. So collaboration is very fundamental. Wasseem, I specifically picked that question because it relates to what I was going to ask you. If you have had a chance to look at it, could you respond to it? Oh, you were muted.
Sorry, thank you, Dr. Paul. Do you want me to do you want me to respond live or in chat?
Oh, live. I thought you would respond to it.
Yeah,
live.
Joe's question in chat, you mean?
Sorry?
A question by Joe in the chat, right? You mean?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
sure.
what I
I mean,
meant.
it's a really good question, obviously, and that framing is exactly what we're trying to get at. So from our experience, the best entry points, if we want to have sustained improvement in welfare, are these points where farmers are already making these frequent decisions and they can see immediate effects. So, feeding, routine water management, these are really strong starting points. And because these are things that are done daily, and small changes can quickly translate into let's say visible outcomes. So behavior, growth, mortality changes quickly if we focus on those starting points, and they tend to be also low disruption and high feedback entry points, and and they tie well into welfare. So of course, we could also talk about harvesting or handling as being critically important from a welfare perspective. I think they're obviously harvest is not that often unless you're doing partial harvest throughout the season. That we don't see that too often in the farms where we collaborate with. But then is, constraints on infrastructure and market pressures, and that makes a bit more difficult to um, really intervene in that context. So yeah, we don't focus as much on them as we do on the behavior change parts of throughout the production cycle. Yeah, and then I guess I just wanted to say that for us, the key really is that, not looking at a specific stage. So if we can integrate improvements into existing routines and then link it to outcomes, the farmers could quickly see value, right? So that's what makes practices stick in the long run.
Okay. Thank you, Wasseem. Thank you all the panelists for your submissions and for building more onto this discussion.